Select Water Committee and the Water Development Commission. The purpose of our meeting is to do good things with state funds and water and our communities, and let's all work together to do good. So with that, we'll first start with roll call today.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Choma, Commissioner Craig, Commissioner Glick. He was running late. There he is. Hey, Commissioner Glick. Commissioner Lawson. Commissioner Little.
Here.
Commissioner Suker.
Here.
And I'm here. Vice Chairman Kaley.
Here.
Chairman Cott.
Here, and now
Mr.
we'll have roll from Select Water.
Senator Boner.
Excused.
Senator Driscoll.
Late.
Senator French.
Here.
Senator Grew.
Here.
Senator Steinmetz. Representative Banks. Representative Eklund. Representative Larson. Representative Nyman. Representative Paxton. Chairman Simpson.
Excused.
Chairman Hicks.
We have a quorum, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And next is the Pledge Allegiance to the flag, and we'll look at the flag to my right.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. So the first item on our agenda is the 2023 funding recommendations for new development, account 1, levels 3, 2, and 1. And everybody has, I don't know, the spreadsheet. We're on the first page of the spreadsheet, the first top 2 blocks. We'll vote on the blocks individually as a block, but there'll be a quick review of each item in the blocks by the director. And if you're in the audience when your item comes up or online, please come forward. And the director will help us out with that. So Director Mead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the first project, so again, we're on the summary tables. We want to make sure we've got a count 1 summary table in front of us. And in the recommendations notebook, we are on page 164 for the Cheyenne-Bory Wellfield 2023. This is one of the projects we spoke about during the workshop for the Cheyenne Board of Public Utilities. And again, they're looking at drilling 2 wells in the Bory Wellfield, and then taking 2 existing wells on the Belvoir Ranch, and basically completing those with pump houses, pumps, and transmission line to their treatment facilities. The overall project cost has been estimated at $10 million, and the request is for a 67% grant in the amount of $6.7 million. The recommendation, as we discussed 2 days ago, was to do not fund at this time. And again, the reason for that is we feel like that with the information we have currently, we don't want to tie up money for unnecessary capacities and transmission pipelines and bigger pumps than we need to. So we feel like it's best to go drill those wells first. We're talking to the Board of Public Utilities about possibly applying for the groundwater grant program for those 2 wells. So with that, we have Brad Brooks attending for the Board of Public Utilities. And so if you have any questions, I'm sure he'd be happy to answer them, or I can answer any questions you might have as well.
Are there any questions?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
Mr. Brooks, could you just
say a little bit to that TCE groundwater plant that we have there at the facility on whether or not that needed to be expanded or not?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chairman. Brad Brooks, Director for the City of Cheyenne Board of Public Utilities. I was able to listen in on Tuesday to your guys' workshops. I did hear a lot of the questions that were asked. Pertaining specifically to the Coors groundwater treatment plant, that's an air stripping unit that removes the TC out of the well field there. That facility currently is designed to process about 4,000 gallons per minute of water. Currently, what's coming out of that well field is only about 17 or 1,800. With this project would be probably another 1,600 acre feet, or 1,600 gallons per minute, excuse me. So we'd only be probably 3,300. So there would not need to be any expansion to that facility currently to do this project. Ultimately, we'll probably need to expand it when we develop the whole Belvoir Ranch, which will probably be about 3,000 acre feet. But that facility was designed with the proper piping that we can just basically mirror the existing footprint and treat up to 8,000 gallons per minute. So hopefully that answers what you wanted.
Yes, thanks. I appreciate that.
Thank you, sir. Our next project is?
Okay. Next project is on page 172. This is the cloud seeding for the Medicine Bow Sierra Madre Range. This is our aerial program that's been in existence for about 6 years now. Now, just to clarify, this is for next year, 2023-24 season. We're already funded for this coming year. That's going to start here in the next about month and a half, well, not even that, a couple weeks, as we see with the snowfall this morning. Anyway, so the aerial seeding program, again, is over the Medbow Sierra Madres, and it has benefits to the North Platte River system as well as some benefits to the Little Snake River system. And then we've got a secondary priority extension that we would seed the Colorado Never Summer Mountains, but that is paid for exclusively by Jackson County Water Conservancy District out of Walden, Colorado. And then we also want to mention, we have a funding partner in this with the Cheyenne Board of Public Utilities every year for $50,000, and we very much appreciate their contribution to this program. So with that, the budget for next year's seeding operations is $825,000. And with that, I'd ask if there's any questions.
Are there any questions concerning the cloud seeding Medicine Bow Sierra Madre?
Mr. Chairman.
Senator.
My recollection is, Director, that there was some money that we put to go back and look at some of the analysis as the efficacy of the program. Could you just give us a quick update on where we're at with that?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if I could, we should have Julie Gonzar trying to join virtually. Is she on?
Yes.
Okay.
Can you
Julie,
hear me
did
okay?
Yeah, did you hear the question?
I did hear the question. Yes.
Handle that for me. I'd appreciate it.
Yes. Thank you for asking that question. Yes, we, if you remember last year, money was appropriated about $300,000 for an operations hydrological assessment for our aerial program over those two mountain ranges. And this past year, we hired NCAR out of Boulder to be the consulting firm for that project. And they got started at the very end of August. So that project is underway. It should be completed within a year. And it's really exciting because with the advanced models that they have and all of the data that we've gotten from our aerial program over the past 4 years, this will be the first time that we will hopefully have quantitative numbers for what we can expect for enhanced precipitation and also resulting added stream flow. And this is directly based off of the operations that we've been doing over the past few years. We have a lot of data from those years that are going to be integrated as a part of this project. So that's been underway for about 2 months now.
All right, thank you for that update.
Thank you, Julie.
Mr. Chairman, the next project on page 175 is also cloud seeding. This is our ground-based program over the Wind River Sierra Madre Range. And again, this is for partial financial support. We have partners in the lower basin that contribute on the order of 63%, and Wyoming contributes 37% of this particular funding program. Again, this is for next year. We're already funded for the one that's going to start here in a couple weeks. And the benefits to the ground base and the Sierra Madres and the Wind River generally benefit the Colorado River Basin. So, and with all the discussions occurring as of lately, we can get all the help. We need all the help we can get in that basin. So the budget for state of Wyoming is for $301,000. Overall budget is $800,000. So as you can see, the lower basin states are contributing roughly $500,000 on that. So with that, I would ask if there are any questions.
Are any questions concerning this cloud seeding project, Wind River cloud seeding?
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Hicks.
Real quick, if we could just get an update of where we're at with those agreements that are with these other entities. Are those annual agreements, or what's their commitment long-term?
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, Julie, would you like to handle that again? Is Julie dropped off now?
No.
Okay, sorry. Your picture doesn't come up until you start talking. Go ahead.
Yes, I did hear the question. So we have a programmatic agreement with all of the lower basin entities that was signed in 2018 for a 7-year stretch. So we have a few more years on that agreement, in which every year we have an amendment to that agreement, in which we have to submit a proposal to the lower basin entities as to the funding that we are requesting from them, with a proposal on, what the project would entail every year. So we have that underlying programmatic agreement, but then every year we have to submit an exhibit, and that is how we get the funding every year from the lower basin folks. That programmatic agreement, forgive me because I'm forgetting how many more years we have left. I think we have about 4 more years left for that underlying agreement.
So, Mr. Chairman, a follow-up, recently with this, as part of the Infrastructure Act that was passed, there were some allocations to the Colorado River Basin. I believe BOR allocated $500 million to the upper basin. Was there any discussion, or has there been any discussion amongst the basin states with BOR to potentially use some of that money for enhanced weather mod or to offset the current level of contributions? Yeah. So are those discussions going on, looking at that source of funding?
Mr. Chairman, Julie, if you'd like to handle that.
Yes, my answer is going to be very vague because right now it is vague. We have been approached through our lower basin contacts about the potential for funding from Bureau for next year operations, but we don't have any details as to how much they have for that, how much they're willing to give, or what specifically it would be used for. But it seems like that conversation has just gotten started as of just a couple of weeks ago.
So follow up, Mr. Chairman. So Julie, on that is when we look at that, is there any opportunity to expand that program if those federal dollars for BOR were available? Or are we pretty well maxed out what we can do in the Wind River, or within the Wind River range?
Mr. Chairman, I do think there's room for growth for sure. In potentially both ground base and even bringing aerial into that basin. I think there is room for growth for sure.
So Director, what I would ask Julie is that you guys, because these negotiations are going to happen fairly rapidly, I would anticipate over the next 2 or 3 months for some of the allocation of this money, that we get what that potential is and some estimated cost associated with that. So as an FYI, we need to get working on that. So if this thing comes to fruition and that 500 million through the UCRC is available, that we've got something ready to go. So I'm just curious as to what that potential looks like and what the costs would look like.
Yep, I know Julie's staying very close in touch with all that stuff, so we'll make sure we're paying attention and ready to go if we have the funding that comes available.
All right, thank you.
We have another question, Representative Larson.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. To the director, I think there used to be some help from industries down in the Southwest. Is there still some dollars going to the program from them?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, when we talk about the lower basin entities that are contributing, that's those entities. And that consists of the Central Arizona Water Conservation District, the Colorado River Board of California, and the Southern Nevada Water Authority. Julie, feel free to pipe in at any time if I say something incorrect.
Yes, I can add to that answer. In the past, we have had some interest. If you're talking about some of the local funding partners that we've had in the past across the Green River area, we are in conversation with some of those local funding partners for this winter going forward, but we just haven't had the commitments yet. And those are usually just a couple extra $1,000s that we can include in this program. But the bigger funding partners are the ones that Jason just mentioned in the lower basin.
Representative Nyman.
Just curious, if those dollars are available, do you guys have future sites already established that would work with that? If it was kind of, we hear a lot about shovel ready. Do you have site ready information that would say that would be able to be used and provide to the BOR if that money does come available? And if so, if not, then how long would it take to kind of get that information out to make sure that we had proposed sites that we could offer for those dollars?
Mr. Chairman, I can take a stab at answering that question related to the BOR potential funds that might come in. We do have some additional ground-based generator locations on the west slope of the Sierra Madre Mountains that were originally part of our 10-year pilot study that Barry Lawrence managed that ended in 2014. So those were dismantled after that research was completed and operations began just in the winds. But as there becomes new opportunity for ground-based generators, based on all of the research and siting that was done on that pilot study, there would easily be some locations that we could use for ground-based generators. As far as implementing an aerial program, that would take a little bit more work to plan out. But I think that we would have the ability to work fast in doing that also.
Thank you, Julie. Are there further questions regarding this topic? I just want to add back to the Wind Rivers and the local support from industry. I believe there's the Trona Mines, the Pacific Corps, and the Rock Springs Sweetwater County Joint Powers Water Board, and their contribution is in the level of the city of Cheyenne. It's not hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's small, but they do support the project.
So, Mr. Chairman, we'll move on to the next project. There's no other questions on cloud seeding. So if you refer to page 178, this is the Happy Valley Water Transmission and Storage 2023 project. So this is, the project will be to replace old and failing water system transmission lines for both Happy Valley and Osmond. As we heard in August, those groups have come together and constructing a new water storage tank to really promote kind of a regional water system between the two. So the overall project cost estimate is $5.82 million. We'd be looking at the 67% grant portion of that. And we are proposing just to fund currently the pre-construction. And that would be the design, bidding documents, access permits, easements, and title opinion. And again, just as a reminder from our workshop the other day, that the reason for these kind of just pre-construction, the idea of come back next session, is that we don't feel like we would hold these municipal projects up. Again, they usually take a little bit longer through the design and the acquisition of easements. And we don't want to commit money to projects that, if they have a problem with an easement, then that money's tied up in that project when it could be sitting in a sponsor contingency fund and be available for a project that's ready sooner and get stuff done sooner. So again, that concept, I just want to remind everybody of that, because that's going to be a general theme through the rest of this block of projects. I think that's all I have to say about this one. Are there any questions? And I should mention that Mark Erickson with the district may be here in person if you had any questions for him as well.
Welcome, Mark. Are there any questions for Mr. Erickson? Commissioner Lisa and Salmi Dalton.
Thanks, Mr. Erickson, for traveling so far this way. I'm glad that you guys are working on it. I know that you guys had the dispute, the EPA came in, and I think that was settled, it sounded like yesterday. Is that causing any problems for your plans, or are you all good to go?
We're ready to go. We're on the verge of taking it over from the private owners now. PSC should do it this month. We should have that solved. And we're in the process of combining the laws. We run through a little bit of a quick there with the right signatures now, matching the side or the property deeds. So if there were odds of getting that straightened out, it's all should be taken care of that stuff by the first year, if not sooner.
Are there further questions? Thank you, Mr. Erickson.
Mr. Chairman, I want to correct something I just said about the sponsor contingency fund. I keep confusing in my mind. That's really for the amendment projects that we'll be talking about in the next block and not for these new construction projects, but apologize for that. So the next project is on page 188. This is the Sheridan Northeast Transmission Main Extension 2023. For the city of Sheridan, and this project is to extend the water supply system through an area of Sheridan that is currently underserved, both in location and capacity to the northeast of town. The cost estimate is $2,355,000, and again, we're proposing just to fund the pre-construction dollars only at this point, which would be in this form of 67% grant at $213,060. And then to come back next year when they've got easements and designs and all that stuff in place. I would mention that we have Dan Roberts and I believe Rich Bridger online. They were planning to attend, but with the poor weather this morning, they're attending virtually. If you have any questions for them, they're online here.
Welcome, Dan and Rich. Thank you for attending online. Are there any questions? Hearing none, thank you for your service and hard work on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, the next project is on page 196. This is the South End Water Users Improvement Service District Pipeline 2023 project. The project would be for the Lane 9 extension and the West End tie-in project. And this is to bring in kind of an underserved area, as well as creates a pipeline loop for both the South End water users and the town of Cowley. It really improves both the systems and potentially an emergency connection for the Shoshone Municipal Pipeline and Northwest Rural. So again, the overall project cost was estimated at $4,970,000. We are, again, proposing that we just fund the pre-construction costs in the form of a 67% grant for $307,800, and then to come back when things are ready next year. So with that, we have Willie Bridges, and go ahead, I'll just let you guys introduce yourselves.
Good morning. I'm Willie Bridges with Prior Mountain Engineering. This is Shane Brost, who is a board member for the district.
Thank you for traveling here, and do we have any questions for these gentlemen? Hearing none, thank you for your hard work and service.
Thank you. We appreciate the consideration.
Okay, thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman, with that, that's the end of the first block of new projects or new construction projects in account one, and would ask for your consideration of that total block that amounts to $1,955,060.
With that, do we have a recommendation or a motion? Yes.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Kaylee.
I move to accept recommendations for account one, level 3 projects in the amount of $1,955,060.
Thank you, Commissioner Kaylee. Do we have a second from Commissioner Lee Craig? Although is there further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Now, we'll move on to the second block.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chairman, the next project is on page 204. And again, these are account 2, level 3 construction project amendments to existing projects. And here's where I would like to again remind everybody from our discussions, the way we went through these were if we felt like and knew that they were ready to bid as of September 1 of this year, they got that kind of tier 1 shovel-ready status. If they weren't, then we are putting that money into the sponsor contingency fund so they can come back when they are ready. So again, prevents from tying up money to a particular project and gives them some incentive to get things done as fast as they can, because easements tend to be the thing that delays projects the most. So this first one, Arapahoe Pipeline and Tank. For the Northern Arapahoe Business Council, I should mention that we have Jola Wallowing Bowl online, I believe. And this project includes 2 construction projects, both the Casino Loop and the Beaver Creek Tank and Transmission Line. The design on these began back in 2016, but they determined that additional funding was needed. They did get some additional funding from rural development and were able to complete the loop portion of the project back in 21-22. And now they're wanting to get the Beaver Creek Tank and Transmission Line completed. The overall project cost is $5.5 million. The previously approved budget was for 1.926 and change. So the additional project increase request and recommendation is for $493,080. And as well to extend the reversion date from July 1st, 2023 to July 1st of 2025. So with the RD or Rural Development Funds and our funds, we're looking at about a 44% grant, 56% loan, or 56% match, I should say. So with that, I would ask if there's any questions for Jola online. Is she online? Okay. We just can't see her until she starts talking, I think.
Oh, okay. Welcome. Thank you for your attendance online. Do we have any questions regarding this project? We have no questions. Thank you for your hard work and dedication, and wish you well with this project.
Okay. Next project, and Jola will be online for this one as well, is the Ethity Water Supply Project, and this is on page 206. Again, for the Northern Arapahoe Business Council. This is one we spoke about the other day where The original project was to construct an alluvial well field and replace the transmission line from the Little Wind diversion intake to the Ethity water treatment plant, upgrade some pumps, and make improvements to their storage tanks. They were, and there's a slight modification to this one, if you recall, where they want to remove temporarily that well field pipeline portion of the project and try to complete the rest of the project within the funding available. And that had a lot to do with the rural development funds that we're getting ready to revert here pretty soon. And then they'll most likely be back for the additional funds, probably from us as well as rural development to complete that wellfield transmission line. The overall project cost is $4 million, and we're looking at a 50-50 grant sponsor match with the rural development funds. And we are at this time proposing that, yes, to approve the modification as well as a time extension to complete that work. So extending the reversion date of the project from July 1st of 23 to July 1st of 25. With that, I'd ask if there's any questions.
Are there any questions for Jolo? Commissioner Anselmi Dalton.
Hi, Mr. Chairman, thank you, and Jolo, hopefully you can hear me. I know that there was issues even when I was on the Select Tribal Committee with getting these easements with the Wind River Indian Reservation and different places. How is that coming? Are you guys having better luck now, or have you obtained them, or what's your expected time analysis given the 2-year extension we're looking at here?
So we're currently working on the right-of-ways for the transmission line itself because the original right-of-ways that were submitted at the time and were outdated, so we had to we are currently resubmitting, and I've been in contact with the BIA superintendent, and he has stated that that process should be a lot smoother than it was in the past. Because like you've stated, it took us 5 years to get the business lease for the well field itself. So that's why we are moving on with the well field, with the funding that we have. But we're currently working on the transmission line right-of-ways, hoping to get them this year. Hoping to get them completed by this year.
Are there further questions for Jolo? Hearing none, thank you for your hard work on this project, and we wish you well with it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, the next project is on page 209. This is the Broken Wheel Ranch Water Supply 2017 project. We again talked about this at the workshop. This project is to design and construct a groundwater well, storage tank, and transmission pipeline. It's been delayed by the difficulty in finding that well site, and I think they finally found a landowner that's willing to put that on their property. The request, and they have RUS funds and SRF funds as well. So the overall project cost is roughly $1.5 million, 40% grant from us and 60% match from the sponsors. The request was for an additional $300,000 and a 2-year time extension. And our recommendation is just for the time extension because, again, getting back to that shovel-ready status, we didn't feel like they were ready. As we discussed, they did apply for ARPA on this project and were successful through the SLID board in getting that funding. So with that, we have Peggy Gwynn online, and I believe Jason Linford is here if we have any questions for them.
Yes, I just want to thank you for extension. We're so happy that Chairman Simpson had recommended us to apply for the ARPA, and we're so happy that we got our funding through that. Thank you.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
That's all I want to say is just thank you very much. Thank you for extending, and thank you for all that you do.
Thank you for those kind words. The Select Water and the Commission appreciate that. And we appreciate your hard work and Jason's hard work on this project.
Great.
Next.
Mr. Chairman, next project is on page 211. These next two projects are both Gillette projects, and I believe we have Steve Peterson, and I apologize to Joe, I won't even try to pronounce his last name. So I think okay, I didn't know if you were going to be here or not, but so just real quick, this project is a Gillette Regional Extensions 2017 project for the city of Gillette. This is to provide funding to connect 4 service and improvement districts to the Gillette Water Regional project. The project costs have gone up in their delays in getting easements and right-of-ways. And the original request was for 67% of those project increases in the amount of $1,132,300, as well as a 1-year time extension. And again, we are suggesting to recommend the time extension of 1 year, but not to increase the budget, and just have them come back when they're ready to the sponsor contingency fund. So I would ask if there's any questions of the sponsor.
Are there any questions regarding this project? Thank you, sir, for your hard work and attendance, and wish you well with the project.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
And we'll keep him in the hot seat here for just one more second, because the next project is on page 213. It's the Gillette Regional Extensions Phase 4 2018 project, again for the city of Gillette. This one was for connecting Fox Ridge and Rosette Ranchettes improvement and service districts to the Gillette Regional Water Project. And there were some delays in the Fox Ridge with designs and right-of-ways. So again, the request was for an additional $252,000 and a 2-year time extension. We are recommending the time extension, but again, not the additional funding at this time. So with that, if there's any other questions for the sponsor.
Are there further questions for the sponsor? Hearing none, drive safely home.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Have a good one.
Thank you. Okay, the next project is on page 215. I don't believe we have a sponsor here for this one, but the project is Glen Rock Transmission Pipeline 2020 for the town of Glen Rock. This project has been successfully designed. I should say it's a design and construction of a transmission pipeline. They've not submitted the documents for the DEQ permit, so they're getting pretty close. There's been some delays because of, all the things, COVID, supply chain, et cetera. And the cost of the project has gone up to roughly $2,576,000. And they are looking for the 67% portion of that. So the request was for an additional $730,000 and a 2-year time extension. Our recommendation is to approve the 2-year time extension on the reversion date from July of 25 to July of 27. But again, for them, when they're ready to come back to the sponsor contingency fund for further consideration at that point in time. That I was at. Any questions on that particular project?
Is there any representative here?
Don't believe so. Yeah.
Thank you. Next project.
Next project is on page 217. I believe we have Brian Seppi here representing the Green River Rock Springs Sweetwater County Joint Powers Water Board. This is for their Pump Station 2019 project. It was for the design and construction of a pumping station and transmission pipeline. And of course, there's been some delays currently in the design phase and awaiting signatures on some easements. The overall project total cost is estimated currently, the increase was roughly $4.15 million. And the request from the sponsor was for an additional, the 67% portion of that, which equates to $2,779,000 and a 2-year time extension. And again, I sound like a broken record here, but we're recommending for the time extensions at this time from July of 24 to 26, but to when they're ready to come back for consideration of the sponsor contingency fund.
Well, welcome, Mr. Seppi. Would the time extension cover your needs?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee and Select Water. We recognize the predicament that the office and water development is in with all these inflated costs. All the projects are coming in considerably higher, and we do need the time extension. We did put in for an ARPA grant for this project. It received fairly high markings. It received 18 of their points. It was about halfway down the first sheet. Unfortunately, they did not fund any priority 2 projects. And the board had to rank it priority 2, not because we didn't think it was important, but the board, as the owner of the system, had to be the one to apply. Even though it's a City of Rock Springs responsibility, the board owns the system, and the way those rules were written, we had to be the ones to put in the application. We also have a need for an on-site generator at the plant, so the board was in the predicament of prioritizing, do we have something at the plant that benefits everyone, or do we have this other one? So we ranked the generator first, and unfortunately it fell out because of that priority ranking. So we are in support of Select Water's concept of adding more money, and so I speak in support of that. I only point out the peculiarity in our system where the board owns the system. We're the ones who have to make that application, even though it's on behalf of the city. And so I'm hopeful that if there is more money, that consideration that little nuance that might be different than other systems is taken into consideration. But for this committee, I certainly appreciate the time extension. We've essentially got the second alignment secured. We're discussing that with the landowner as we speak, and once that's secured, we'll continue on with the design.
Thank you, Mr. Seppi. Are there further questions for the Joint Powers Water Board, Sweetwater County area? Hearing none. Mr. Seppi, thank you for your hard work and dedication. Those of us from Sweetwater County here appreciate it.
Well, thank you, and thanks to the commission and Select Water.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks. Okay, the next project is on page 219. These next 2 projects are both related to Lander, and we have Lance Hopkins online for these for questions. The first one is the Lander Storage Tanks and Pump Station 2019 project, again for the city of Lander. This was to replace 3 existing water tanks and a hospital pumping station that was near failure. The city actually bid this project earlier this year, and the bids came in significantly higher. And Lander is an area that we're seeing extremely high bids, but so they are ready to bid. So we felt like they met that as of September 1, they're really ready to go back to bid. So our recommendation is for the additional funding, 67% grant funding in the amount of $3,376,800. And I would ask if there are any questions for Lance Hopkins on that.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, Lance was available. He dropped off. He's no longer on.
So Lance is no longer available. Yep. Are there questions for the director on this project? Hearing none, we'll move to the next item.
Okay, the next Lander project is on page 221. This is the Lander Well and Transmission Pipeline 2021 project. This was to propose to complete 4 wells, or basically hook them up by installing pumps, pump houses, controls, and a pipeline connecting those. The cost increase on this one, or I guess the new estimate, was $4,105,000. So the sponsor's request was for the additional 67% grant portion of that, an amount of $1,865,950. Again, we don't feel like they're quite ready to move forward on this one, so it didn't meet our tier 1 projects, and they could come back or look for other funding. And so the recommendation at this time is to do not fund. And I believe the sponsor is aware of that. And Lance just got back on if we have any questions.
Okay, so on the Lander projects, what, are there questions for Lance? Lance, thank you for joining us online, and we hear no further questions, and we appreciate your hard work and hope this project goes well for you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, the next project is on page 223. This is one we spoke about again at the workshop. The Melody Ranch Water Systems Improvements 2018 project. This is where they were trying to get a new well and transmission line and have had delays and cost increases as well. There was a slight change in scope on this one, and it's really just to try to locate the well as near as they can to the pump house, so they have less transmission lines. So that's pretty sensible in my opinion. The request was for an additional $710,000 and 3-year time extension. We are just recommending the time extension and that the budget not be increased at this time. But however, as we discussed at the workshop, Melody Ranch did apply for ARPA funds and were successful in getting those. And I believe we have Matt Ostick joining virtually if there are any questions. There he is.
Thank you, Matt, for joining us. Are there questions for Matt regarding the Melody Ranch project? Hearing none, thank you for joining us virtually, and thank you for your hard work, and hope the project goes well for you.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, the next recommendation for your consideration is on page 226. This is to add additional funding to the Account 1 Small Water Project Program. I think we're all fairly familiar with what the Small Water Program does, but this would be new development of projects as opposed to rehabilitation of existing projects, which would be the Account 2 Small Water Program. What's presently available in that account is $521,396, and the request is to add an additional $1 million in there, just in anticipation of project application demands this year. And just as a reminder that those fund 50% up to $35,000 on projects, and there's usually quite a few funding partners in those to get a lot of good stuff done on the ground. And as a reminder, we'll be receiving applications by November 15th on those, both new development and rehabilitation small water program. So if we see things that were unanticipated, we should have a little bit better idea of that come the December meeting if we need to tweak anything as far as more funding or what in either of those accounts. But this one is, again, just for Account 1. So I'd ask if there's any questions on that.
Thank you, Director. Are there questions regarding the Small Water Project Program? Hearing none. Next.
Okay, so the last project in this block is on page 228. This is the Torrington Well Connection 2021 project for the city of Torrington. This project was to complete and connect a new well to the distribution system with the installation of a pump house controls, et cetera. I guess with the inflation and everything else, again, we're seeing additional needs, and as well, they've discovered they have some high nitrate levels in the new well, and it's kind of impacted the city's initial plan to plumb the wells directly into the system. They may require some treatment at the well. They did request more or less almost expanding the scope of the project to include reverse osmosis and backup generator, but we said, we really can't afford to do that right now. So what we're proposing, the original request was for additional $300,000 and a 1-year time extension, and we are just suggesting the time extension in the recommendation at this point in time. And if they can come back later, we may be able to help them, or if they can find other funding in the meantime. So I don't believe we have anybody from the city of Torrington joining us today, but I could try to answer any questions there might be.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Hicks.
was there any discussion of directing them towards the Safe Drinking Water Fund, the revolving funds that DEQ has for the, it seems to me like that would be an eligible expense for the reverse osmosis. Would be much more appropriate to go that way than it would be to come through water development.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not positive about that. I don't know, Bill, if you have any. I know they did apply for ARPA funds. Obviously, that's separate from your question, though.
And then while I've got that, I mean, the other alternative, we look at RUS for some of that. And I understand most of those are loans, but there is a loan forgiveness component in that safe drinking water stuff. I mean, this looks like a classic case where we need to direct them to that funding source instead of coming through water development.
And Chairman, this is Bill Brewer with Water Development Office. I believe they are aware of those. We will refresh their memories that there are other funding sources available out there that may be more suitable for this project.
So just to follow up, Bill, so, I mean, when these applicants come in there and you go through the analysis and say, well, it's, either we don't have the funding, do your staff and do you direct them and say, you need to go visit with DEQ and those SRF funds?
I wouldn't say we direct them to that, but we do make them aware
Aware of that
of those others.
And if they're, Mr. Chairman, if they're asking for a loan, we do direct them to the SRF for their loans. Because then again, that stretches our dollars because we have more funding to match against somebody else's loan money.
Yeah, and you know, sometimes depending on the nature of those, there is a loan forgiveness component on there. So even that is a grant loan mix that we just need to, when we're stretched with the funding that we have in these accounts, we need to really direct to the extent possible. And I just continue to remind the committee and the commission that it's $478 million in the SRF program right now.
Mr. Chairman, I would also mention, when we get into these larger population municipalities, they tend not to be as eligible for those loan forgiveness or principal forgiveness grants. So for what that's worth.
Large
People
is a
grant money and
relative
not
term
loan
in
money.
Wyoming.
Yeah, exactly.
Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This isn't just specific to this project, but several of them that we've gone through. So as we're going through, I'm seeing they did not apply for ARPA funds on this project, but they have several other projects they're applying for ARPA funds for. And we just put some more money back into the ARPA Direct for cities and towns and other projects. Do we have any criteria saying, okay, let's complete what we're doing instead of start a bunch of new projects? Because I think myself, personally, I anticipated the ARPA Direct to help alleviate some of the pressure on water development rather than, you know, to try to fill in some gaps we might have and offset some of that, rather than necessarily just start a bunch of other new projects and still rely on this program too. So is there anything that we're kind of cross-referencing with all of that, you know, between the projects that we maybe could offset some of the pressure on water development with ARPA and the new projects that are coming in? And then secondly, I don't want to overwhelm you with questions, but do we have that list that Chairman Simpson was talking about yesterday of the projects he was hoping to complete funding? Because I don't remember that in our packet. And if we don't have that, if we could round that up too.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'll take the second question first. And we don't have that list. Again, that would be a state lands ranking list. We did look back to see how would that potentially affect some of the projects we're talking about today. And it doesn't look like it would necessarily affect those. getting back to your first question more so, just as a reminder, these were water and wastewater projects. And I think some towns got the message of, hey, we need to look at our priorities and what needs to be taken care of first. And that might have been falling into the treatment or wastewater type realm. And so that was their number one priority. And the overall, I think, theme of the ranking that we were involved in is, there's only so much money to go around. So we're not going to give more than one project to a particular entity. So it might have been their first priority was a wastewater project rather than a water project. I don't know if we had a whole lot of contact with folks in regards to, hey, you've got a project from us, that should be your number one project if you're applying for ARPA. So we did not do that. And I think we saw some cities and towns that were kind of getting back to what you were alluding to of, hey, we've got a pot of money here and a pot of money here. Let's see if we can get it done as much as possible. So there was that too that we noticed, so.
Thank you. Are there further questions for the
Mr.
director?
Chairman,
Commissioner Suker.
as I look down the list today, our extensions, I have a concern, and some of them, yeah, they're probably legitimate. They're probably all legitimate. But I want to ask a couple of questions. Our water development criteria, do we have to have easements in place before we expend funding?
Mr. Chairman, just to get easements in place, obviously, we're having to expend some funding, right? Because that's part of the project cost.
That
So,
could be, yes.
yeah, so it's kind of can't have the chicken or the egg, you know what I'm saying? So, but yeah, the easements, before we give the notice to proceed and bidding the project, the easements, designs, the title opinion, all that stuff needs to be in place before they can bid the project. One of the reasons we are talking about on these new projects, pre-construction only, rather than just design only, is because we have seen this as an ongoing issue of getting easements, and we want them to get the design and the easements in place before they come back and ask for additional funds. So that project funding, that partial project funding should allow them not only the design, but to get those easements in place too upfront and to be ready sooner. And I guess I'd ask Bill if you have anything to add to that.
I believe that answers the question.
Well, I think that's a great thing to do because you look at it and I understand materials. If they're committed for a project, even on the construction side, by the time those materials are expended or the contracts are signed, those materials can change in price because the supplier only supply or allow a certain time for you to purchase that material at that price. And when that timeline is gone, the price can increase. And I think that's what we've had. The other thing then that I wondered about, that these time extensions from being a contractor at one time cost money. They cost the people, the suppliers, they cost the contractors, they cost the customer that wanted to build it. So if we can delete those and get these times down where we don't do extensions, I think it's a great thing for us to look at.
Mr. Chairman, I would just clarify the time extensions. We're not holding a bid, for the next year while we're asking for the time extension. These are just time extensions and delays on design or acquiring the easements. They aren't actually, the time extension is to get to the point where now they can bid and get the project done, and that's been extended
Right,
out.
but
for
our
1 year.
material is
I
still
agree totally, yeah.
accelerating.
Yeah, some of these that have started years ago and have just been held up over time. Some of them could have been built before COVID even became an issue, and we have seen all these things, so.
But I do believe we're on the right course here with what we're doing with these contracts. Let's make sure they have this one dates back to 2017. Why? You know, I mean, that's a long time back.
Yeah, we're trying to get a better handle on that. And again, with this idea of not funding the construction pieces of these, they're going to be a competitive process to come back in the door as soon as they can to get to that sponsor contingency fund. So they're going to be motivated, I think, to get things in place as quickly as possible.
Well, thank you. That answers my question. Yeah. Or my concern.
Are there further questions for the director?
So, Mr. Chairman, I'd ask for your consideration of this block of Account 2 Level 3 project amendments for both time and funding. The overall funding recommendation is for $4,869,880, and then, of course, the modifications and time extensions we've discussed.
Okay, hearing that, do we hear a motion to accept this second block?
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Anselmi Dalton.
Mr. Chairman, I would move the level 3 project amendments for both time and funding in the amount of $869,880.
We have a motion and a second from, was that Commissioner Little? Or, oh, Commissioner Glick, thank you. Is there further discussion on that? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Hearing none, motion carries. We move on to the next item on the agenda is 2023 funding recommendations, dams and reservoir program, account 3, level 3 and 2. And that is the third page of your spreadsheet. Director?
Mr. Chairman, I'll wait for the paper rustling to stop before I announce the page number. Okay, so the first project is on page 310. And I have Kent Johnson representing the Shell Valley Watershed Improvement District here, as well as some others I see. So just I guess a brief conversation here. So this is for the Levitt Reservoir expansion for the Shell Valley Watershed Improvement District. And if you recall, last legislative session, we added, I think it was $30 million, if I recall correctly, to the sponsors contingency fund for account 3. And we received bids for the Levitt Reservoir project. And again, just as a reminder, I guess, Levitt Reservoir expansion project, when complete, will be roughly, there's about a 643 acre foot reservoir that used to be there. It's breached now. The enlargement would take that up to 6,600 acre feet. So this project was bid out spring of 22. And if you recall, we had a lot of interest. Unfortunately, we only actually received one bid. I think a lot of that had to do with getting quotes from manufacturers and a number of things. But and that, if I remember right, came in around $70 million from the actual contractor price. And there was some negotiation to try to get that down. And we ended up around 66 or 67 million, if I recall correctly. And we're just about, I think, to the point where folks felt comfortable we wanted to move forward with that bid. But since it was such a large ask of the sponsor contingency fund for account 3, I think we felt it would be more appropriate to bring that back through the normal channels in the construction bill as an amendment, so it could be vetted properly by the legislature. And so this is really what this, I guess, amendment to this level 3 project would entail. We are asking for $32 million to be appropriated to this project. Now, this is going to be contingent upon something I'll talk about here shortly, So since that money has been appropriated to the sponsor contingency fund for account 3, we'll need an action here in just a second to basically revert that money from account 3 sponsor contingency fund just back into the account 3, so then it can be available for appropriation to this particular project. I guess I'll just, instead of going on, I will ask if there's any questions and ask if the sponsor would like to come up and say anything.
Sir, would you like to come up and
The one
face some
thing,
questions?
I guess while everybody's getting situated here, obviously everybody realizes, costs are going up. The cost of this project has gone up over time. Dams aren't simple projects, as we know. But I want to say that, we reran the economic analysis on this project back with this last spring when we were talking about sponsor contingency funds. And the estimated economic benefit of this project over its 50-year life expectancy, and I would say it's probably going to last longer than 50 years, is $141.5 million. So it's going to be a benefit to not only the community, potential game changer for that community and helping them stabilize and be more drought resilient, but I think for the region in general, it's going to have benefits. And if you just look at the public benefit, because we do have the criteria that says we cannot fund more than a public benefit, count 3 is somewhat special where we know we haven't been able to get projects built at a 6733. So the commission has the authority to go all the way up to 100%, but not to exceed public benefit. So looking at the public benefit, we've got the direct benefit to irrigation on additional crop yields, but then you have that multiplier effect of how that trickles down throughout the community and the region, as well as recreation benefits. And then we've took credit for a small construction benefit, realizing, you're going to have specialty contractors in some cases that may be coming from out of state, but there will be some use of Wyoming workers and materials such as concrete and things like that. So of that $141.5 million benefit, we're looking at roughly $96 million public benefit. So we're well within, the bounds of what we need to live by here. So I think it's a great project and we need to see it forward. I guess I'd hand it over to you, Ken, or just if you have questions, really.
Yes, sir. Thank you for coming.
Well, first of all, I want to thank each and every one of you for being on this committee. Sorry. I want to thank each and every one of you for the hard work you do. I know you're a long way from home when you got bad weather coming in. The second thing I'd like to acknowledge is Bill Brewer and Jason Mead. These guys have walked us through this process. They meet with us on a Zoom every 2 weeks. We call them at 7 a.m. in the morning, 8 o'clock at night, question after question. State of Wyoming needs to be proud they got these guys. They're top-notch guys. I'll be brief. We've got our Vice Chairman, Greg Flitner, here. We got landowner Carl Bertinelli. We got our grant writer, Ev Dunkley. He can answer maybe any questions on BOR. But I'm just going to simply say, if you haven't been up there, it's a beautiful spot. Dan can tell you. We see that snow pile up on the mountain, and we've had a couple decent years, and it melts, and it goes down Beaver Creek, into Shell Creek, into the Bighorn River, and straight into Montana with no benefit to the state of Wyoming whatsoever. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, sir, for your kind words, recognizing Bill Brewer and Jason Mead and all the staff. Greatly appreciated. Are there any questions for Mr. Johnson? Hearing none, thank you, sir, and thank all those that also came from the Shell Valley Improvement District. Greatly appreciate it and your hard work and dedication to a sometimes frustrating project.
Mr. Chairman, I see Senator Hicks crunching numbers here, so I'm anticipating a question.
Senator Hicks.
So this brings up the broader question, but I think this is an appropriate time having had numerous discussions over the year on the cost per acre foot for storage, just running the numbers here, it hasn't been that many long. I would say probably 3 years ago, there was a very extensive discussion about, what's an appropriate cost per acre foot. So with all these escalation and costs, and I'm running the numbers here, 69, 507. Is that 6,600 feet? Is that 100% yield? Or is part of that?
No, so part of that would be a minimum or conservation pool. So I believe the new water is 4,461 acre feet. There's about a 1,500 acre foot minimum pool. And of course you have that 643 acre feet. Throw a bunch of numbers at you to confuse you. I think just in starting to answer your question is that appropriate comes down to, is this going to be a benefit? Does the benefit outweigh the cost? And that's what I was just talking about. If we look at the benefits of the project of $141.5 million versus the cost, you're looking at anywhere from a 1.5 to 2 to 1 benefit cost ratio. And technically we're looking at anything over 1 is a good investment for the state of Wyoming because you're making money on the money you're spending. So, and in addition to that, there's things that are really not able to be quantified, and that is keeping agriculture viable in the state of Wyoming and these communities, because a lot of these communities wouldn't be here without the ag community. That's why they're there in the first place. And we know that in order to keep folks' next generation in the business, they have to be able to survive. And with the changes in, I don't want to, if it's climate change or climate variability or extremes or whatever, but my opinion is the only way to get a handle on that, to be anywhat resilient to that, is to store water, because you can't hold it up when it's running down the creek, and you can only hold it up so much with conservation type projects of putting ditch in a pipe. It's still only in the creek for a certain amount of time. So how do you hold it up until you can use it? So unless we want out-of-state folks coming in and buying our ranches, we need to figure out how to make this work for everybody.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I would agree with everything you said, but that's not the discussion that typically happens on the floor. And the floor is in the legislature is how is this relative with the balance with all the other projects? And I'll just back you up to the previous governor and the 10 and 10. You were there. We identified 10 reservoirs, and it was $1 billion+ dollars. And the argument then was, well, we need to fund the ones that are most cost efficient, not the ones that are most costly. And so I don't disagree with anything you said. I'm just telling you, when we get to $17,000, $18,000 an acre foot relative to some of these others, it will be an ongoing discussion. And I support this project and everything else, but I'm telling this is the commission and everybody there. If we're going to build dams and reservoirs in the state of Wyoming, you need to go back and tell every representative and every senator in the state of Wyoming that you need to support this program, because we do not have broad legislative support for constructing dams and reservoirs in this state. We don't. And that's what it's going to come down to. And somebody's project's going to get moved to the bottom because it's $18,000 an acre foot versus $10,000 an acre foot. I agree 100% with everything the director says. But we're going to come to a point where we're not going to build. This account is, what's the balance now in our level 3 account?
Well, Mr. Chairman, with all the funds we have appropriated, so you're talking available balance, the way it sits right now, it's $7.2 million. It's that top right number on your summary table. Now, in order to do what we're talking about on this particular project, you got to take that $32 million out of the sponsor contingency fund. So roughly it's, say $39 million. And then when we get done talking about the other project, which is Alkali Creek Reservoir, and it's in design, we're going to end up with roughly $6.8 million left in that. So we're going to get.
4 years ago, we had over $90 million in this account.
Well, and again, there's money appropriated, previous money. We have currently for 46 million, I guess it's right in front of me here, $46 million appropriated to Levitt. We need more. So that's where some of it's just obligated. And we've got 59 million obligated to Alkali Creek We've got some funds obligated to Middle Piney, Big Sandy. We're in lots of NEPA, around, so Big Piney's Middle Piney's almost done. Hopefully next summer we'll have it done. Big Sandy should be complete next spring or summer. So we've got some moving along. But we can't wait until we find the cheapest reservoir out there, because we're taking these as we get them. It's difficult enough to get a record of decision that's favorable to get a permit to build these things. And we've got two sitting in front of us right now with Alkali Creek and Levitt Reservoir. I know Eb Dunkley, that's working for Shell Valley, lives in the Shell community, is working his tail off trying to get applications and feasibility reports into the Bureau of Reclamation to look for funding under this small storage and groundwater and surface water program through the bipartisan infrastructure law. I think they were successful in getting some funding through the drought resiliency program already, but we're talking $1.5 million. And if they can get more money through this other program, then they'll turn that money back, because you can't match, federal to federal. But this, I hate to keep rambling here, but the surface and groundwater program through BIL is 25% not to exceed $30 million, if I remember correctly. But there's $100 million in it for the next 5 years, and the fiscal year 23 only has $20 million in the budget. So we're in competition with whoever else applies, and they don't even have enough in there to max out one project if needed. So doing their best to try to find funding. I'm preaching to the choir here, so.
Yeah, and so I want to put a really fine point on this discussion. You know what really irritates the living hell out of me is when we're doling out a lot of money to build dams and reservoirs in one part of the state, and then your delegation votes against dams and reservoirs in another part of the state. That just frickin' burns me down. How in the hell can we come back and spend $18,000 an acre foot and your own damn delegation doesn't support the program for dams and reservoirs in other parts of the state? We fight that fight. So let's talk about what this account's going to do. With this, what do we get? 6% under the cap goes to account 3 at some.
0.5%.
0.5%.
$775,000 a year. So we're living off of an influx of infusion of
So the
money
point
from the
being
beginning.
is the accounts, we're not building any more dams and reservoirs. And so if this committee, Select Water Committee, comes back and says, we're going to take $50 million out of our surplus funding right now and move it into account 3, and a single representative or senator votes against that, and you have a project here, I have a real problem with that. That's why I'm telling you, if you want your dams and reservoirs, you need to support the overall program. And you need to go back and have that conversation with your representatives and your state senators. Because I'm going to make a motion before we get out of here today that we take $50 million of general fund money and we move it into account 3 for the past raids at the legislature. We don't have support for this program. And it's your representatives and your senators. Now, I'm not saying everybody, but it seems like we've fought this battle over and over again. Now, we don't get support from the very beneficiaries of the program. And that's not just ag, that's municipals too. And so we're either going to support the program or we're not. I'm just telling you, it's a shot across everybody's bow out here that's here today, that's receiving money for this program. You better go back and have a really serious discussion. I've asked the commission to adopt rules for a number of years that say if you do not get letters of support from your legislative delegation, you're not eligible for the program. Because quite frankly, after 12 years of fighting this battle, I'm tired of fighting the battle, and the very people that show up here every year don't support the program. Your elected officials don't support the program. So that's the way it's going to work from now on. If you want support from the program, as far as I'm concerned, if there's not a letter in the file with your application for money from your delegation, I'm going to be a no vote on it. We need your help. That's what I'm asking for, is your help. Every one of you. Better go back and have a discussion with this. That's where we're at. So Mr. Chairman, I apologize. I think I'm singing to the choir here, but it is a continual frustration. We get to this point, and the very people here today, and a lot of them, and I'm not picking on anybody in particular. And we go down there and then we raid the account for $14 million of biennium to fund the Board of Control out of account 1. And some of the biggest beneficiaries from this program, it's your delegation that's done that. You need to have that conversation. So thank you. I'll get off my soapbox right now, but it is a constant frustration to go down there and fight like hell for funding for your programs and for your funding there, and then to be undermined by your very representatives and senators in the legislature. We got our homework to do, folks. Thank you, and I apologize.
Thank you, Senator Hicks. Representative Larson has a comment.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I too want to echo what Senator Hicks said. 8 years, been down there battling this. It's frustrating. We got to get WWAMI on board with this, county commissioners, all of you, to reach out to your legislator and tell them how important it is. It's frustrating. So I agree.
Thank you, Representative Larson. Commissioner Anselmi Dalton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with Senator Hicks and Representative Larson. Having been in the legislature, it is difficult, and I support the idea of getting the people in your community who represent you to actually have to sign the letters of support. It's not enough to talk to them and have them say, yeah, yeah, yeah to you. It isn't. I think the letter in the file would be a good recommendation because it's only fair, and I know it's frustrating that people cry and moan about it and they ask for the justification, and I do agree that Senator Hicks has fought the battle, and so I would support the recommendation letter more than just talking to these people. Thank you.
Senator Giroux has a comment. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I too agree. I think Senator Hicks is right. My question, and I think I got it through part of his talk there, 6,600 square feet, 4,100 in the pool. I go back on the numbers though, 141.5 million. And then the one I want to key on is the other number, 96 million, Jason, that you were talking about as far as ancillary benefits. I guess my question is to try to, and get into Senator Hicks's point, to try to sell this on the floor. I mean, when you come up with that number, do you talk like to the Parks Department? Do you talk about to some of these folks to actually hone down some numbers if there were campgrounds around these areas, or just or a similar reservoirs or similar types? I mean, this is a beautiful area. I do know that. So, I mean, I guess just what goes into that, getting that number, and are we getting enough out of it? And because that's to me seems like a pretty good way, another good way to sell it. I got all the stuff about the farm. I think you have a good wrap on the agricultural uses, and I think those are what good points. But those other uses too, I think have a lot, whether it's outdoor recreation, other things. So I just wondering about that. If you could help me.
Sure, Mr. Chairman. So the indirect irrigation benefit, the way that's figured is the Bureau of Economic Analysis through the Department of Commerce actually puts out numbers for increases for Wyoming for these types of construction projects in general. And that multiplier is a 1.63. So it's fairly simple to come up with the indirect benefits associated with those direct benefits to crop increases. The recreation benefits are more a look at the surface acreage of the reservoir, both at the normal high water line and when it's drawn down to that minimum conservation pool, and some averages. And based on that, there's some regionally recognized numbers on, okay, you can expect so many boating days or so many fishing days, and you kind of average those. And does that make sense for this area? People going to be out there ice fishing or just in the summer or what have you? And you put dollars to each one of those days to come up with those recreational benefits. And then I mentioned the construction benefits and how we're very conservative on that end of, only really taking credit for about 10% of the construction benefits based on what materials we think would be local and the number of workers we might consider to be local. I don't know if that helps answer that question.
It does. And if I can follow up, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
The other one that kind of caught my attention, and I think is something we need to really work on, it sounds like, and I know this happens in every project, that everybody's looking for money everywhere from every pot of money, every program there is. By the time we hit the floor, I think it would also be really helpful to have that information to be able to say, hey, they're not, we talk about this a lot, first money in, last money in, but also really helps to show that, that these folks are out there turning over every rock. I know you guys are helping too, but just to get that word out and quantify that, say this is, they've applied for $38 million worth of other monies in all these other programs. We don't know how much they'll get, but this is what's in the pipe. Some have been turned down, some are in process. Do we get that? Can we get that for this? Or is this something that we always get on? Maybe it's a new guy question. I don't know, maybe on this.
Mr. Chairman, I think that's a good idea. We can put together just a little 1 page, half a page, kind of just factual sheet and get it back to all the Select Water Committee members. I know most likely one of you will be carrying the bill when it gets out there. So yeah, we'll get that put together and maybe at our next meeting or obviously in advance of the session, we'll get that to you guys.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's all I have.
The one, I guess one quick clarification, we were throwing a lot of numbers around. I would consider both the active irrigation pool, or I should say the new active irrigation pool and the conservation pool of 1,500 acre feet to be included when you're looking at cost per acre foot. So that number would be closer to $13,000 an acre foot rather than the $17,000 that Senator Hicks was suggesting. I'm including the conservation pool as well, so that's closer to $13,000. The other thing I wanted to mention, just to make sure everybody's clear on this, the recommendation is for the 32 million, and the 99.9% of that would be going towards the grant, because as you recall, the previous times we've been back on this project, I've made a commitment anyway to the district, realizing they have a certain amount of money that they can put out when they pay for this per acre foot, and that was $25 an acre foot. So that's why we're keeping that grant portion the same, or I'm sorry, increasing the grant portion and the loan portion just slightly, and that was really because of how the percentages fell out and how the legislation is going to have to be written. Either you're going to short 35,000 or you roll it in just because of how legislation is written. So anyway, I just wanted to clarify the vast majority of that money will go towards the grant portion of this.
Senator French has a comment. Senator French.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. I would agree with Senator Hicks on moving the $50 million. I strongly support that. But this project, we're talking a lot of money. I understand, as an irrigator, I get it, but we're talking huge numbers here. How many acres of land directly benefit from this, the irrigated land that benefit from this?
Mr. Chairman, we've got roughly 15,200 acres and several hundred landowners.
Okay, that's just my comment, that we're talking a lot of money.
15,000 plus acres.
Senator French, do you have, would you like a follow-up or have?
I'm just, my comment is awful lot of money for this, that can be spread around to a lot of other things. That's just my comment. We're talking huge numbers here.
Thank you very much.
And Mr. Chairman, I just point out our criteria and our #1 project priority is storage, multi-purpose projects. So.
Is there any, Senator Driscoll?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chairman Hicks, for the gentle nudge. It was refreshing, and we've all felt that. Looking at the cost of these projects, and I'm going to ramble just a little bit. Irrigation projects, folks, have never paid for themselves in the history of Wyoming. If we'd have followed a strict pay-for-it deal, we'd have no Seminole, no Keyhole, no Alcova. None of them have worked. The federal government was bold. They went out a long time ago for various reasons and built reservoirs that economically made no sense, and they built them, and they've played a key role in the state of Wyoming and what we have today. And we're faced with a similar thing. As for any of you that are irrigators, and as I look around the room, a lot of you are, you provide recreation for a big part of the state, and the recognition that's here is one of the first times it's done it. I can tell you, I came, I believe, around 20 years ago and had them do a study on one of my reservoirs out at Devil's Tower, and it was interesting. They came back and they were shocked. We didn't have a sponsor. You guys actually funded a deal with no sponsor. They came back on a $20 million reservoir 20 years ago and said, "You won't believe what we found." We found, because where it lays in proximity to Gillette and the area, it actually will pay for itself with recreation because of the returns. And it was roundly put down exactly like Senator Hicks talked. I represent to you that irrigation's a small part of a lot of these projects. They appear to be a big cost, and you want the guy that's getting the water, those 1,500 acres downstream or whatever it is, you want them to pay for it.
Senator, I just texted, can't hear you.
Okay.
Could you speak up a little bit, please?
They want the irrigators to pay for it. And the truth is, my reservoir, the state stocked it for a number of years, and it had hundreds of users weekly on it. I think all of these are the same. These are treasures to the state down the road. And back to your talk, Chairman Hicks, we've got to educate not just the legislators, but the people of Wyoming that recreation isn't free. It comes at a cost, and this is one of the ones that the state can help on. And recreation does play a very key value everywhere. We're sitting here in Casper in the middle of town. Virtually everybody goes somewhere on the weekends, and they hope that they have water to go to. Most of them, it's either on a river, a reservoir, or one of our streams that's circled around it for recreation. And I think for me, I'm one of the ones that I'm willing to invest some of our state money back to make our state a better place to live. And I really do. This project's wanted. It does not make sense if you want to try to make someone pay for it. But if you look at the net benefits of it, I think it pays. And 50 years from now, 100 years from now, the people that recreate and live around these reservoirs we build, if you want to compare them to a Thyra Thompson office building, they'd rather have the reservoir. And that's the way I look at it. These are long-term investments, and I encourage all of us to not only put pressure on your legislators, but to talk to people about what the values are to all of us. And, you know, you can see the value to the guy next door to me that irrigates, or any of you folks. Those are direct benefits. What you really don't see is the quality of life for the people that live in the state of Wyoming, the people that use those. And these, nearly all of them, have huge public components. So, you know, my deal is think hard when you're voting and you're supporting it on really 100, 200-year benefits. Because, like I say, I don't take it for granted when I look at Alcova, Keyhole. You look at the recreation use, and these smaller reservoirs are the same. They're good investments. So for us, you know, a lot of the conversation's negative. My belief is the conversation should be positive. Is if you're looking for your grandkids and great-grandkids and why they want to live in Wyoming, it's certainly not going to be over buildings we've built or highways we've paved. It's going to be over recreational opportunities, hunting, fishing, outdoor things that are Wyoming's known for. And I really think we ought to take a bold step. And the second half of this that we haven't talked about at all, other than talking about the flow into it, is how do we enhance water account 3 over time? Because we've got to have money to build these reservoirs where we can build them. And we just don't have the flow into there. So maybe part of the legislative and this committee's talk should be, how do we have a visit with the people of Wyoming about priorities and getting money into water account 3 and who really benefits from it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Are there further comments? Hearing none, we'll turn the meeting back over to the director.
Bear with me, my computer fell asleep. There we go. Okay, well, we'll move on to the next project. So this is a level 2 project amendment. It's the other reservoir we've been talking about for years. And we're on page 314. So this is the Nowood River Storage, Alkali Creek Reservoir. And we've got with the Nowood Watershed Improvement District here today, John, and I see Nancy, John's wife, up there on the screen. So, so this project is under design currently. Again, we've gone through the NEPA process with the BLM and all the cooperating agencies, and have our permits are in place, both through right-of-way permits through the BLM and 404 permit through Corps of Engineers. And so we're into design. We've got Tri-Hydro Corporation, who's been involved in this project, invested in this project for years, working on the design for us. They've also been our NEPA liaison. So back in, I think, 2015, we got $4 million for NEPA liaison work and design. And what we've run into, we've had conversations on this, I can't remember how long ago, a year ago or probably more, on some of the challenges we've run into when we did the geotech investigation for the final design, and some of the surprises we found there, and some of the additional funds we needed to take care of that. And with that, the project is kind of extended and been protracted, and now we're having, these don't happen overnight. So what's happened is we've had landowners that have changed over, and with the price of land, new people are moving in, and folks that we thought we had everything fine with on easements have now, there are new folks we're dealing with, and they have differing opinions, and we're trying to help everybody understand the project, and we're not trying to impact anybody's operations, and trying to make them whole, if not improve them. So there's been issues with that, and continuous conversations that have been occurring. That's led to some potential ideas on modifications of designs to possibly make some of those perceived impacts a little more acceptable to landowners. We're also looking at federal funds on this project, and the potential to, instead of modifying a ditch, to basically put it in pipe instead, which has multiple benefits, water quality benefits. This is a TMDL impaired water body that we're talking about. EPA had comments about that during NEPA. So that we think there's some potential funding out there through different programs that we're looking at. And if we're successful, and again, I was here talking about Alkali Creek, I think it was in August, about how we were using some of that, going to be using some of that discretionary funds to actually have our consultant apply for the same pot of money that Shell Valley Watershed Improvement District is applying for, that small surface and groundwater storage through BOR. So that's been occurring. I think the feasibility study's been sent in, and we're, I guess, waiting to hear on both projects at this point if they're going to be eligible for that program, and whether or not to actually put in the application. So there's potential for design changes if we get federal funding through a certain federal agency, and potential design changes if that funding comes through, in changing some of these aspects of the design, say from modification of ditches to pipes, or moving some ditches upstream to provide more benefits for the project. Anyway, long story short, what we are asking for is we need some additional funding to get those things done, and to deal with the extensions of the project and the issues we've been having with working with different landowners on easements and land acquisition. So we've got roughly $80,000 left in the $4 million appropriation that we're planning to try to utilize, as well as needing an additional $420,000 from account 3 to get through this. So, as well as to extend the time from July 2024 is the existing reversion date for that $4 million to July 1st of 2025. I think I'll stop there. Again, this project cost continues to escalate, just like every other project we've talked about. As part of that Bureau of Reclamation feasibility study, our engineer has updated the project economics. And again, we're sitting very similar to what I just talked about on Levitt. The overall estimated project benefit for this project, and I guess I should back up just for a second, we're looking at almost a 9,000 acre-foot reservoir. The vast majority of that, it would be an active irrigation pool, 6,000 acre feet. And we had a 2,000 acre foot conservation pool. So for the number crunching Senator Hicks, that would be 8,000 total. Actually, I think on this one, you could probably use the full 9,000. 8,965 is the pool that we're looking at. A portion of that pool, we had to work through the 401 certification process as part of the 404 permitting and have some adaptive management obligations for stream flow and making sure that some of our potentially, trying to think what the term is, it's not threatened and endangered species, but it's species of concern within the Norwood River and that we're not affecting stream flow. So we've been having a lot of conversations with Game and Fish and so on and so forth. So anyway, back to the economics. On this one, we're looking at an estimated over the 50-year life and expect that to last longer, $145 million in total benefits. And of that number, roughly 99 million of that would be considered public benefit. The current cost, and I think that was pulled together for this Bureau of Reclamation feasibility study for the funding, I believe is 73 million. Is that right, Mark? Okay. And right now we have 59 million appropriated to this project. So we're going to be in the same boat here in the next year, probably. Hopefully we'll get some feedback on Bureau of Reclamation funding and be successful in getting some funding there. But back to, I guess, the recommendation at hand, we're looking for an additional $420,000 to be appropriated to the final design piece of this project and an extension of 1 year. And again, like I mentioned, we've got at least Nancy Joyce online representing the Norwood Watershed Improvement District and our engineers here as well, if you have any questions.
Are there folks from the Norwood District would like to come up, or?
They're virtual.
Oh, they're virtual, okay. Thank you for joining us virtually. We appreciate your hard work on this project. Are there any questions for the Norwood District or comments regarding this project? Hearing none, thank you for attending virtually and working on a very involved project. We appreciate that. It'll great benefit to the state. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Hicks.
Director, I'm trying to recollect, but doesn't, for the construction and dams or reservoir, does not the commission have the right of eminent domain?
Mr. Chairman, these are projects that ultimately are going to be owned, operated, maintained by these districts. So and when we get to the easement land acquisition portion of this, that's an agreement between us and the district hires the contractor and acquires the easements and the land ownership. Now, I would say that a watershed improvement district does have that power. That's the last thing anybody wants to do. We want to work with landowners as best we can.
Well, absolutely. I just
Everybody
think it's
does.
always important that people understand that right exists.
Well, and just that very comment in regards to some of the conversations with landowners, not to get too into the weeds, but was, well, what if we can't come to an agreement on this easement?
That's
And,
my
well,
point.
there is this option, and that causes people to come unglued pretty quickly, so we don't even like to talk about it. That's not where we want to go. But if you ask the question, we have to obviously provide you the answer of the different alternatives that are out there, so,
And rightfully so, it should make them come unglued.
yeah.
Further comments? Turn the meeting back to you, Director.
Okay, sorry, spaced out there for a second. So, Mr. Chairman, the next and last agenda item is on page 316. One more quick comment on Nowood Alkali Creek is if that funding for the additional design needs comes through, then you would expect us back next March to amend Tri-Hydro's contract for that funding, so.
Thank you.
Okay, so the last one, again, this is the Sponsors Contingency Fund Account 3, and this is simply just to the money that was moved into the contingency account last November legislative session in anticipation of the Levitt Reservoir project, knowing, not knowing, I guess, what bids were going to come in at. We need to now, in order to put the additional funds into the Levitt Reservoir project in the omnibus construction bill, we need to get approval to take the money out of the sponsor contingency fund back into account 3, so then it's available for that Levitt Reservoir project. So this request, the uncommitted budget within that account is $32,275,000. We're asking for $32 million of that basically to be put back in or reverted, whatever the term is, back into account 3. And we still have an encumbered amount for Middle Piney Reservoir to complete that project that is still in the account, or part of that is being used, but anyway, if there's any questions, I'd be.
So, Mr. Chairman, it seems to me like the more appropriate mechanism would be just to appropriate directly out of the contingency, instead of put it back into the contingency and then
Back into the account.
just take that, whatever we need out of that contingency fund and in the water bill, appropriate that directly to those projects.
Mr. Chairman, that's essentially what it's going to be. I just didn't know how to word it in the recommendation. We're going to have an amendment that removes the $32 million out of the sponsor contingency, and amendment to the legislation we just talked about 2 minutes ago to put $32 million into that. So it's kind of just a paper exchange, more or less, but
The nuance thing is important,
yeah,
because if we put it back in the contingency fund,
we're into the account 3 is what we're taking it out of
into the account
contingency
3.
back
Yeah,
into account 3.
again, so that'll show up on the profile that the legislature gets that shows that there's all this money in account 3. Then I have a really hard time making an argument that there's no money in account 3, and it becomes a protracted discussion on the floor. If we take it out of the contingency fund and put it right into the project account, that doesn't show up on the profile as having $32 million in account 3.
Okay.
So the way we would want to do that is to take that contingency fund and put it right into those projects in the omnibus water bill. So it doesn't go back to account 3, it goes right to the projects.
And Mr. Chairman,
Very important if we're going to have this discussion about moving forward. Otherwise, it's profiled as money in an account, and it becomes a very complicated discussion to try to get 92 people to follow you as you're explaining that on the floor. So it's the way we need to do that as far as the structure to be able to move that money out of the contingency straight to the projects and the bills.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'll work with David on exactly what that looks like. We'll get it figured out.
Chairman.
The one question, maybe real quick, sorry, Commissioner Glick, would be, so the account, this is the
Contingency in account 3.
correct. How do we say this, David? I might need your help. The available or unappropriated account balance is what we're seeing here, the $7,210,000 on our sheet, right? that the way to say that? So I don't know, the sheets you guys are talking about legislatively may show what's in the account, whether it be appropriated or not. And that balance is big because we haven't actually started going to construction on a lot of these things. But it is obligated to projects already. This is the only available funding.
See, what happens on our end of the equation, that stuff never shows up because it's obligated.
Okay.
But if you move it back into account 3, then it shows up as a balance in account 3, and then it shows, oh, we've got $40 million, 7 plus the 32, whatever that number comes up to. That's what's profiled, that's shown, and then we got to get and say, no, it's really not that. This is obligated through this bill, but they're completely separate conversations that happen on the floor. We walk through where we're at budgetary wise, and it profiles all that money, when in fact it's obligated. And so what I'm saying is, let's don't profile it, because it's already obligated. And particularly if we're going to have a discussion about directly appropriating general fund money back into account 3. It makes our job almost impossible to do that if we move this money back into account 3. And what I'm saying, we're just going to move it straight into Alkali and Levitt.
Yeah, okay.
Contingency fund.
Mr. Chairman, thanks for that clarification. I just wasn't sure how it showed up, whether it was obligated versus not. So thank you.
So the stuff that's obligated is not profiled.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I believe Commissioner Glick had sorry.
Yes, sir. Commissioner Glick.
I guess I'd like to make a recommendation, a motion. Recommend that we fund Levitt Reservoir expansion in the amount of 32 million, which will come directly out of the sponsor contingency fund. And then fund Knollwood River storage for $420,000.
We have a motion from Commissioner Glick and a second from Commissioner Little. Is there further discussion on that motion?
Mr. Chairman, based on the discussion we just had, we do have a recommendation out there to move $32 million out of the contingency fund. So I guess I'm just trying to understand how we would do that with the conversation we just had. If it would just need to be restated, and we can modify the recommendation for the December meeting, that the $32 million come out of the sponsor contingency fund into the Levitt Reservoir project, rather than reverting to account 3. So if you want to handle that one separately, that might be the.
I'm gonna ask Commissioner Glick just to restate his motion. What was your motion one more time?
Okay, my motion was to fund Levitt Reservoir in the amount of 32 million. And that funding will come directly out of the sponsor contingency fund out of, and the Knollwood funding, or approve the Knollwood funding in the amount of $420,000.
So thank you, Commissioner Glick, for restating your motion. So Director, does Commissioner Glick's motion cover what you're asking or not?
Mr. Chairman,
Or stating, or?
I think that works, and then I would, I guess, just ask for one more motion when you guys are done acting on that one, on the sponsor contingency fund, how I just modified it.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second on the floor. Hearing no further questions on that, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Yeah, Commissioner Glick.
And what is, this is for Director Mead, what is the next, is it to do a recommendation? Is that what that next motion would be?
Yeah, I would say the motion would be to transfer $32 million from account 3 sponsors contingency fund to the Levitt Reservoir expansion level 3 project.
I mean, can I use
The only thing we didn't do was take it out of, maybe we're good. What do you think? We're good?
We're good. Okay, great.
Thank you.
So do we have a motion on the, or is there a motion needed on this, the item block 3?
I think we just confirmed that we just,
We did that, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
you and I are both confused, but we're good.
So we've closed that page. Next on the agenda is other items requiring commission action.
Mr. Chairman, I don't believe we have anything that I recall.
Oh, did we vote on that? Okay, thank you. Okay. All those in favor of Commissioner Glick's motion regarding the first 2 blocks?
Get a second. Did we get a second?
Yeah, we had a second.
We had a second. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Commissioner Suker.
Mr. Chairman, I don't believe we have any other action items for the Water Development Commission. And I think we took care of all of our discussion yesterday in regards to LaPrel update, critical aging infrastructure. So I guess I would ask if there's any other discussion.
Is there any other discussion? If the Select Water Committee and the commission and staff just stay briefly after the adjournment for a non-business item concerning travel to a basketball game after our next meeting in December. So that would be a non-business item. So do I hear a motion to adjourn?
No.
Nope.
Mr. Chairman, we still have Select Water Committee has some business.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just real quick, just recognize Water Development staff one more time, just on my behalf, because there's been a lot of work done to get ready for this meeting, the recommendations, and appreciate everybody's hard work. And Bill Brewer in particular, and Barry, Bill had a lot of the ideas on how we're going to get all these things funded with a little bit of money we have. So I appreciate his efforts too. So.
And the Water Development Commission, and I'm sure Select Water also echoes that recognition. Thank you for your hard work. It's greatly appreciated. Thank you.
So members of the Select Water. So, Mr. Chairman, if I can reconvene the meeting of the Select Water Committee, is there any appetite at this point in time for directing staff to include in the omnibus water bill an appropriation to account 3? Is there any discussion or any appetite from the Select Water Committee now to go ahead and direct the staff to include, at this point in time, a preliminary recommendation to include $50 million of general fund money to go to account 3?
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Guru,
so moved.
all those in favor, raise your hand. All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes. And so, David, when we get to the December meeting, let's have that included into the omnibus water bill. So, all right, thank you. And with that, Mr. Chairman, that component of the Select Water Committee meeting, we are adjourned.
And the Water Commission meeting, motion to adjourn.
To adjourn.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, same sign. Hearing none, meeting adjourned. Just for those that are interested.
Guess we're out on that one.
No basketball game for us.
Uh,